Hello, sinners! What you see behind me is a limbo, a place not heaven nor hell, where souls are sorted before their final destination. On this plane you can meet saints and sinners I am interested in. Today we'll talk about a prize for your soul. He is Hugo Boss, a 63-year-old German tailor, fashion designer, who sold his soul for a prospering company. And he is Adolf Hitler, a guy he sold it to. Here is the receipt from 1931, when Hugo Boss joined the Nazi Party. Hugo Boss's story begins in 1924 in Metzingen, where he opened his clothing factory. Nothing fancy, just general-purpose clothing stuff, and as such went into near bankruptcy. A few years later, in 1931, street riots and Nazi ideology started to spread violently throughout Germany. This year, Hugo Boss decides to join NSDAP, Nationalistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, in English, National Socialist German Workers' Party, or simply Nazi Party. What is important to those who think he did it simply for the money to save his company is the fact that Adolf Hitler came to power 2 years later, not before. So it was either Hugo Boss's pro-Nazi convictions, or he had a crystal ball and saw the future that made him join Hitler. And we know, fortune-telling is not for businessmen. Hell, he even joined German Labor Front in 1936 and Reich Air Protection Association in 1939 and the National Socialist People's Welfare in 1941. He was also a member of the Reichskriegersgeburt and the Reichsbund for physical exercises. That granted him lucrative contracts for years. This is his ad showing who he sold uniforms for all main Nazi party branches, SA, SS, Hitlerjugend even. There is one main misconception. Hugo Boss did not design the uniforms. He simply produced them. The designers were Karl Diebitsch and Walter Heck. The latter one designed famous SS runes. How do we know for sure that Herr Hugo Boss was not a simple opportunist? This question popped up in 1997 with the statement of Hugo's son Siegfried Boss. Of course, my father belonged to the Nazi Party, but who didn't belong back then? The whole industry worked for the Nazi army. Well, 1997 is not some random year that Boss's son decided to say such a foolish statement. This is the year of the Swiss banks leaking information about secretly destroying documentation of the dormant Nazi accounts. One had Hugo Boss's name on it. Those were the accounts Nazis made in case they lose war, and one can only imagine, because of sacred bank secrecy, what was on them and how it was obtained. Michael Moore, an American journalist, tried to access one of those Swiss accounts using the most famous name on the list.
Excuse me, I was ready. Good morning. I would like to make a withdrawal, please. The name is Hitler, Adolf Hitler. You have my signature on file.
I need your passport or an identification.
If you look it up in your file, it's there. I'm certain of it.
And for this, I need your passport because I don't know you.
I know when I opened the account here, I signed all of those... 1945.
So, back to the question. Was Hugo Boss a Nazi or an opportunist? His actions are the best evidence. He chose devout Nazi party members to be managers in his factory. One of the German workers, a seamstress Edith Poller, described the situation when she calmed a Polish forced laborer. Then we calmed her down. I also stroked the head of a Polish woman. That was not welcome. Gertrude, Hugo Boss's daughter, walked through the company and called, "You have to think about the national community!" And, "That destroys the community spirit!" So, like daughter, like father? Forced laborers, slaves. Why did Hugo Boss choose them? Because they were a lot cheaper, especially since he chose those from Eastern Europe, like Poles and Russians. In opposition to the Western workers like French, they had to wear dehumanizing badges. They couldn't move freely, couldn't use public transport, and earned pennies. Brace yourselves for the irony. Eastern laborers earned pittance, and they had to pay for their own accommodation and food and even taxes, so no money was left. Do you get it? People caught on the streets of Poland like animals, children often. Hugo Boss employed 14, 16-year-old Polish girls. Although most forced laborers he used were 20, 25-year-old women. They were transported to Germany, forced to work for the Nazis, and Nazis required to be paid by the victims for all of this. Jan Kondak, a 17-year-old boy who was brought from Poland to Germany to work for Hugo Boss, he said, "There were lice and fleas in the barracks. The food supply was also poor, and when air raids came over, the laborers were not permitted to entry to air raid shelters and had to remain in the factory." In 2001, he says of Hugo Boss, "He should be ashamed of the unpaid forced labor. He made himself rich through us." The most shocking is the case of Józefa Gisterek, a 20-year-old Polish forced laborer who escaped Hugo Boss' factory. Hugo didn't let her go back to help her family in Poland, so she fled all over Germany to get there. She was arrested and taken to several concentration camps, Auschwitz among them. But Hugo Boss took her back to his factory. She was to be an example to others who think of escaping. On 5th of July 1943, Józefa killed herself. After her death, her younger sister Anna was forced to work for Hugo Boss till 1944. Metzingen was not a concentration camp, but the Eastern workers couldn't leave the place where they worked. Women had no medical care during pregnancy. They had to work for 12 to sometimes 18-hour shifts even. Constant threats and slaps from the Nazi management. Yes. Hugo Boss really couldn't do anything about it? His company flourished from 20 workers in 1932 to 100 in 1937 to 320 in 1944. Boss employed 140 forced laborers. A half of them were Polish, many of which were kidnapped by the Gestapo from Poland. Hugo Boss also used 40 French prisoners of war. Of course, he was not the sole supplier of the uniforms for the Nazis, but he was a Nazi whose company grew on blood and sweat of the war victims. And after the World War II, he had the audacity to fight in court that he was a mere follower of the Nazi regime, just to avoid a steep fine. Yes, a follower with a Nazi Swiss account. Well, his sentence was reduced. Hugo died in 1948 due to a dental abscess and joined his friends in the Devil Wears Hugo Boss infernal fashion house. Today, of course, Hugo Boss as a company still exists and has nothing to do with Nazis. They even paid some money to the victims, but its name smells of sulfur. Did you really have to join Nazis? The answer is no. Nazis could force you to work for them, kill for them, but they couldn't force you to join them. Those who did it either because they agreed with them or disagreed and wanted to save lives. Everyone knows a story of Oskar Schindler, who died poor but with clear conscience. But there were others, like a famous boxer, Max Schmeling, a world's heavyweight champion between 1930 and 1932, who blatantly refused to join Nazi party, and moreover, hid Jews from them. He was drafted to the Wehrmacht army, but was wounded the very first day of the battle and was sent home. Not many know that Coca-Cola's drink Fanta was developed in Nazi Germany during World War II by Max Keith, who managed German branch of Coca-Cola and refused to join Nazi party. Despite it would make him a fortune, he would be independent of Coca-Cola and make money of his own. But he had the courage to say no. Many believe that people join Nazis because of the fine designed uniforms, sense of unity, runic aesthetics, Ubermensch hocus pocus, secret-like rites and ceremonies. I agree. Even Americans fell for this, and this is no The Man in the High Castle fiction scene. This is Madison Square Garden on February 20, 1939. Today, Nazi fashion is a thing in Asia. They call it Nazi chic. I call it stupidity. Sometimes tremendous, vulgar stupidity. But in 2012, in Poland, a country that was very first victim of the Nazis, a poster was made that shook the world. Mainly because it was supposed to advertise the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. To this day, it is considered by the advertising industry as the worst Polish ad concerning Holocaust, and possibly the best concerning Nazi chic. So, dear sinners, today you learn that you reap what you sow, sow with an E in the middle, and that the devil cannot force you to be evil. It is your choice if you stay strong or decide to take the easy way. Anyway, this was the story of Hugo Boss, a sinner whose deeds resonate till this day. Stay healthy, and as a penance, subscribe to us.
Reverend Damien in Limbo, take one.
Hello, sinners. What you see behind me is a limbo, a place, not heaven nor hell. Wait a minute. Is that Kumar? Kumar, what am I doing here? This is Nirvana. Why are you in my Nirvana, Reverend? This is Limbo, not Nirvana. Is it? Boris, where did you take us?